Well, apparently there are two powers in the world, the sword and the mind. In the long run, the sword is always beaten by the mind. This I found on the web here under War, and these I get through good documentaries. And the sort of thing that I listen to...
Here in the United States, we're often brought up and told we don't have propaganda, that we have a hard-charging investigative press, we have this educated, skeptical, even cynical citizenry, and that if there were powerful interests trying to manage and manipulate public opinion, they would be exposed. The reality actually is just the opposite. Academics like Alex Carey and others who've spent their lifetimes looking at how propaganda works finds that it's actually in Western democracies and open societies where you need the most sophisticated sorts of propaganda. And since World War I, thanks to people like Ivy Lee and Eddie Bernays, propaganda has become a business, this business of public relations. Or as one of the firms that has often represented dictators, the Burson Marsteller firm puts it, their business is perception management.
Well, perception management, of course, is what people like myself who've walked away from the misuse and abuse of intelligence and continue at the same time to maintain a sense of personal integrity, see is very evident and has reached a critical point where all of the institutions have been totally propagandized and by virtue of the misinformation rendered totally corrupt. Back in 2009 actually, I decided to come on to the YouTube and try and give a point of view of somebody who was in a role of an analyst of British foreign policy at that time, in accord with my father, and his guide at that time, who was the Vice Admiral by the name of Strutt, who had a particularly different view from that shared probably by Prince Philip and most of the other militarists who were around. Certainly Mountbatten had a great effect upon British foreign policy, as did Churchill and Anthony Eden, of course. I was in the Air Force at the time of Suez, actually I left just before Suez, but certainly the Suez crisis was on the entire time I was in the British Air Force, and I was quite outspoken against the British foreign policy at that time. Now, what to do about the current situation? Well, I'd like to offer to the people of Egypt, the people of Libya, the people of the Middle East, to the Taliban, to the Chinese, to the Russians, to the United States of America, to all governments everywhere, that it is time for world peace. And this can only be achieved by a complete renaissance in the manner of our doing business. And the only way we can hope to do that is with the authority of the common people. Canada is not by its very nature a rebellious country, but I have been calling for a rebellion, particularly here in British Columbia. But before we take that seriously or take it further, we have to identify how we can maybe manage affairs or assist the people. Far be it from me to claim to have any authority to manage anybody's affairs, but maybe assist the people of Egypt to see through their challenges. They are challenges that all modern societies that have been under Western influence and have been caught up in the Cold War, as it was then called, and certainly NASA, I think a very intelligent and thoughtful and caring military officer with courage, following a Naguib to see the end of the royalty in Egypt, with the exodus of Farouk, was something really very bold and very strong. And I'd like to think that it's a lot of the influence of that gentleman and his efforts to bring about a renaissance of the commonality of Arabic as a spoken language in the Middle East. And to do that, I think we have to wake up to a couple of things. First of all, that money is an invention of the money changers, and that this in fact was prescribed and acted out by the Christians, and I think is looked at very differently by Islamic people, that usury is a crime, and that the fact that we tolerate it in the East here, to me, is a blasphemy for the name of Jesus Christ. I think there are many people that don't have a very strong sense of spiritual base, and I think to a great extent they live in a kind of fear of death, and therefore they're unable to live their lives in a fully harmonious and loving way. What I've discovered in the last few years since I've been plugging into the net is that for 25 years I basically said, well, this is all I have to offer, and get on with it. I'm not a Canadian. Well, I'm afraid that doesn't cut it anymore for me. I have to enter into the fray not as a politician but as a philosopher, and what I'm offering to Egypt and to the Middle East is for serious consideration. We have to cut through the radical confusions and biases associated with sectarian religionism. I think we have to look at the relationship between Mother Earth and Father Son and us as children in that creative endeavor in a way that transcends so many of our historic confusions. I think there's nothing in what I suggest is against any of the traditional religions, but I do believe that it acknowledges that a notion and understanding of God is something that has to develop within the individual and does not exclusively get its authority from the priestcraft per se. We're all God's children. That's recognized in all the great scripts of all the Bibles and all the Qurans in the world, that we're children of God, that we are in a surface chemistry between Mother Earth and Father Son. And what I suggest for Egypt is that they have a general election where all candidates who feel capable of running may run and should make their peace, but at the same time to have on the ballot a none of the above option. Now, the none of the above option is a very simple option, and if people look around and say, you know, I think we've had enough of political parties, I think we've had enough of sectarian religionism, I'm just going to put my name in the hat, and if my name comes out, then I will try and act with a sense of integrity towards my history, with a sense of integrity towards my religion, but not a sense of domination or dirty tricks or one-upmanship or competitiveness with my fellows. We're all in this soup together. We can move towards the leisure state. We can, in fact, enjoy a renaissance, a jubilee. I'd like the question of to whom do we owe these great debts to be addressed. In other words, if you have somewhere in your debit file that you're owed millions of dollars, well, just check it off. Just check it off. You know, what do you need in your life but health, happiness, home, and a variety of decency that can only exist when we begin to recognize our fundamental equality. And that means between men and women. That means between religions. That means that we can no longer say, for instance, that Al-Qaeda is behind the Taliban, and behind the Taliban and behind Al-Qaeda and behind the Zionists and behind all of the extremist groups that are happy to see war because it makes money for the people that come along later and rebuild. All of these people need to wake up to the fact that we're in this all together, and that to bring about any more evil and to any more destruction in the world is counterproductive. So to Egypt, to Libya, to all the countries of the Middle East, I would simply say, by all means, bring on new elections, but by all means, have a none of the above option on the ballot. So if people want to reject all the political parties and all the religious factions and simply want to stand as human beings, individual, then have a none of the above on the ballot. And when that none of the above, as it inevitably will in my view, bring forward the real common sense of the people, we should have a random selection of a man and a woman in each constituency, however large or small those constituencies are, and allow people to look inward before they look outward again to how they're going to relate to the common people and to the United States, to Obama, to the Bush group, to these people who've done so much damage, to the original people that came up with the concept of geopolitics, that have set the United States on a course which I disapproved of when I was a child and I disapprove of today, and that is neo-colonialism along with Great Britain. Great Britain behaved reprehensibly at the time of Eton, and we who were closer to what was going on knew that this would lead to nothing but chaos and damage. People tell me that people, especially governments, do evil so that good will result. Well, I think it's time for the goodness. I think it's time to end the evil. I think it's time to get rid of all these people that want to dominate other people's lives. Militarism must end. You know, when I was a little boy, it was the, what should we say, the damage of the Nuremberg trials. And now what have we got? We should have Bush and Rumsfeld
7 years later,
and the rest of those people.
The invasion are clear. According to The Lancet, one of Britain's most respected medical journals, approximately 600,000 Iraqis had been killed from the invasion as of 2006. By 2009, a polling agency put the number at over 1 million.
1 million people have died as a result of the idiocy of the American government under Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and the rest of these people. Obama has done nothing to improve the situation. These people must go. In Egypt, there is an opportunity here for the army, for the mullahs, for the religious disciples to come together and acknowledge a fundamental equality and cut through all the advantages of race and class and money and bring about a new quality of peace on the world. I salute the people of the Middle East who have stood by so strongly by their religion. There are excesses in the execution of Sharia law, but there's no question about it. It's going to stop people from having to steal. But if we have the system of government which I promote, the idea that we have a guaranteed annual income for need. This was understood at the time of Henry VIII in Britain. If you gave people a small income that against some prices which were reasonably fixed, then there would be no need for theft. There'd be no need for anything of that order. We can move forward into that age. It's time now. If not now, when? Do we have to destroy ourselves by more violence? I think not. I think it's time for, what could I say, the leisure state. Nobody needs to be an economic wage slave anymore. We don't need money in our world. Money is the bane of our times. Money should be controlled and invented and distributed by a government which is controlled, invented and executed by the common people. That can be done in Egypt now. The army are ready for it. They understand what Nasser was trying to do. Nasser was a good man. Nasser was a powerful leader. He was a thoughtful man. He managed to get the British out, just as Gandhi did in India. And finally, when we get rid of these lunatics who are running the British Parliament today and claiming that they do it in the name of national interest. No, it's time to live on our own land. It's time to end colonialism. It's time to end this prohibition of a blessed sacred herb that could heal all the nations. Afghanistan, after all, is where they produce some of the best hashish and some of the best heroin. And the opium poppy is there for the elevation of mankind, not for the destruction of mankind. God gave us these plants with a reason. God gave us these plants because they are healers of the nation. And we need to move forward very, very strongly right now to a rebellion here in Canada. Don't send in your tax returns. Don't vote in any elections until it's been clearly described that the government has a vision for the future. And that is not being described by simply talking about economics. Economics is a fraud. Any government that knows what it's doing with the Bank Act would be generating wealth that can be properly distributed. And in return, there'll be the voluntary, peaceful time for taxes so that goods and services can be supplied on a voluntary basis. People would say, oh, well, this is some kind of communism. Well, let's call it communism. Let's call it common sense. Let's see Egypt, one of the oldest traditions in the world, help China to recognize its place. One of my heroes is Mao Zedong. Many people say, oh, 6 million people were died under Mao Zedong. But when I look at what happened as a result of Mao Zedong bringing about that sacrifice of the Chinese people, and Deng Xiaoping, I know, went towards a kind of compromise. But behind them all has been this horror of the United States and its fear of China. And that was brought about by a man called Spikeman when they invented geopolitics in the 20s. There's a very good book that I'd mentioned before, and that's called Between Tears and Laughter by Lin Yutang, a Chinese and a Western philosopher. And I think it's brilliant because I think it tells us the way that these evil people, these people that love war, these people that make money from war, these people that love making violent moves on other people, should, be brought to task. It's time. And in Egypt, there is an opportunity here for the army, for the common people, for the men and the women, for the historic love of those pyramids, that we can bring back peace on this planet. God help us all, and God's will be done. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the tears, but it's been such idiocy.